Odin, Argentina, September 1995. A quiet farming town. One road in, one road out. Most people don't lock their doors. The biggest threat here? Drought. Until the fires came. The first was small. A dish towel in the kitchen of the Pereira family ignited, no stove on, no cigarette nearby. They doused it with water, laughed, called it bad wiring. But then it happened again. And again. And again. Within 3 days, more than 20 spontaneous fires broke out in the same house. The house itself was modest. A single-story, concrete home tucked near a grove of eucalyptus trees. Inside lived Rosa Pereira, a widowed mother in her 40s, and her teenage daughter Maria, quiet, withdrawn, rarely seen without her sketchbook. They had lived in Odin for years without incident, until the kitchen burned. Neighbors first noticed smoke around 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, a thin wisp curling out the kitchen window. By the time someone knocked on the door, a curtain was already ablaze. Rosa had just stepped into the backyard. No one else was inside. She screamed for Maria. But Maria was standing in the hallway, staring blankly at the fire, saying nothing. The local fire brigade responded, a four-man team led by Chief Jorge Minera, a veteran firefighter used to chimney sweeps and grass fires. He later told reporters, "I'd never seen fire start like that. It was like it didn't come from the wall or the wiring, it came from the air." They extinguished the flames in minutes. But 5 hours later, they were back. This time, a pile of folded laundry spontaneously combusted in the bedroom. No outlet nearby. No heat source. Then came the dishes. On the fourth night, Rosa heard a crash in the kitchen. She found a cabinet door wide open. Plates shattered on the floor, but no one had entered the room. Maria was asleep on the couch. Or at least, pretending to be. When Rosa turned her back, another dish exploded inside the cabinet. No movement. No temperature change. Just pressure building and releasing like something unseen was angry. Word spread fast. Small towns are like dry kindling, one match and the whole place goes up. By the end of the week, neighbors had gathered outside the Pereira home every night, watching, praying, whispering. Rosa stopped answering the door. Maria stopped speaking. The only people allowed in were the firemen and the priest. Father Gustavo Vanegas had been Odin's priest for 22 years. He didn't believe in Hollywood nonsense, but he couldn't ignore what he saw that night. He was in the home praying with Rosa when the wall behind them cracked with a bang. The crucifix above the door fell straight to the floor. No wind, no movement, just a force as if something was pushing outward from inside the wall. He called the diocese the next morning. By now, there had been 32 separate fires in the Pereira home. Some happened in front of witnesses. One burst into flame while the firemen were inspecting it. Another started in a room that had just been cleared. The police arrived soon after, expecting arson or electrical sabotage. But Chief Inspector Morales made a statement the town would never forget. "There is no intruder. There is no gasoline. There is no reason. The house is doing it to itself." That's when the government got involved. September 28, 1995. A team of scientists and military personnel arrived unannounced. They claimed to be from a special phenomena unit investigating unexplained environmental events. They sealed the house, installed sensors, cameras. They told the Pereiras not to leave town, and not to talk to anyone. They didn't say why. What the cameras captured was classified, but one technician spoke to a journalist off record. He said, "We saw heat flashes where nothing was present. No electrical source, no magnetic field, just ignition, as if the molecules were being told to burn." When asked what could cause that, the tech just shook his head. "We think the girl is the key." Maria Pereira had become the silent center of the chaos. Wherever she stood, fires followed. When she left a room, the air would warm slightly even with the windows open. Her clothes never caught fire, but the chairs she sat in sometimes smoldered. She stopped drawing. She stopped eating. One night, Rosa found her standing in the living room, whispering in a language she didn't recognize, staring into a dark corner of the room. There was nothing there, but Rosa swore she saw smoke rising from the corner anyway. Father Vanegas requested an exorcism. The diocese refused. They said it wasn't demonic, but they didn't say what it was. Then came the night the flames screamed. A witness, the neighbor Alonso Garcia, was outside when he saw fire light up the kitchen window. He ran in with 2 others, expecting to help. Inside, the oven was glowing red, but the power was off. The gas disconnected. And from inside the oven, they heard a high-pitched screeching sound, like a kettle but sharper. Piercing. Alive. It lasted for 6 seconds, then stopped. When they opened the oven door, it was empty. No heat, no fire, just a black smear across the back wall in the shape of a curled hand. That night, Rosa packed a bag. She tried to take Maria to her sister's home in the next province. But Maria wouldn't leave the town limits. As soon as they reached the road out of Odin, she collapsed. Her body went limp, unconscious but not sleeping. Skin flushed, breathing shallow, as if the air itself was turning on her. When they brought her back to the house, she woke up silent, confused. And from the backyard, a chair burst into flames. The house was under watch now. After the 33rd fire, government officials in plain clothes had installed heat sensors, 2 analog cameras, and a long coaxial microphone in the Pereira family home. They said it was for public safety, but they weren't locals. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't take notes. And when Rosa asked who they worked for, they just said, Buenos Aires. Outside, Odin's main street buzzed with rumors. Some claimed Maria was possessed. Others said she was a witch. A few whispered about Las Sombras del Monte, the forest shadows, a pre-colonial legend older than the town itself. But one thing was clear. Since the strange investigators arrived, the fires got worse. On the first night of surveillance, a couch caught fire on camera with no source of ignition. The flames appeared in one frame, leapt 3 feet high in the next, and burned out in under 10 seconds. No accelerant, no heat signature before it began. The analysts logged the footage but said nothing. They took the tape, didn't leave a copy, and from that point on, they started watching Maria more closely. She'd stopped speaking entirely. Not out of fear, out of something else. Rosa said she began sleepwalking. Sometimes she'd wake up standing in corners. Once, she was found crouched in the kitchen at 3:30 a.m., hands black with soot, eyes wide open. No memory of it. Her hands weren't burned, but a small spiral had been drawn in ash on the wall above her. 5 inches wide, clockwise, perfectly shaped, too perfect for someone asleep. Then came the notebook. Maria's sketchbook had been blank for weeks, but now each morning new pages were filled. Not drawings, not symbols, words, scrawled in tight loops of cursive so cramped they filled entire pages edge to edge with no margin. Rosa brought it to Father Vanegas. He couldn't read it. He said it wasn't Spanish. It wasn't Latin either. A linguist in Santa Fe later confirmed the letters matched no known language, but the structure resembled mathematical logic or machine syntax. One page stood out, in English, written by a hand that didn't look like Maria's. I am awake when she isn't. I learn her skin. The heat is how I knock. When the door opens, I'll speak. Don't take her away again. It hurts. That same day, Rosa tried to remove Maria from the house again. They didn't even reach the end of the street. Maria screamed so loud the rearview mirror cracked. She clawed at the door, and when they turned the car around, Rosa smelled burning. The seatbelt was melting. Meanwhile, in a sealed room nearby, the investigators reviewed the overnight tapes. The microphone in Maria's room had recorded hours of white noise. But at 2:48 a.m., for exactly 6 seconds, a voice came through. A low hum, then a distorted whisper. She burns for us, and we are learning. They deleted the clip, but one tech made a copy on cassette. He later mailed it to a radio host in Cordoba. It was played once, live, before being pulled from the air. The host, Miguel Perez, said in his final broadcast, "That voice, it wasn't in the room. It was behind the microphone, like the machine itself was speaking." Miguel died in a house fire the following week. Official cause, electrical overload. But no wires were damaged. The fires began spreading beyond the house. The backyard tree ignited from the inside out. The local church's confessional blackened without flame. A truck stalled while passing the house, then the tires burst into flame. Rosa begged the government to remove their devices. They refused. They said containment is holding. When she asked what that meant, they told her, "If it's in her, it's safer here." Maria stopped eating. She began losing weight rapidly. Not sick, just dimming. As if her energy was leaking from her body into the house. And the house kept responding. One night, Rosa found the stove humming softly, though it was unplugged. It vibrated in a slow pulse, like breathing. And in the frost on the window above the sink, 3 words appeared. "Don't move her." The scientists were now taking samples from the walls. They refused to explain why. But one investigator whispered to a local police officer, "The carbon buildup has signatures we don't recognize. Like it's artificial but organic. We think it's writing." Rosa began having dreams. In them, Maria stood at the foot of her bed, smiling softly, holding her burned sketchbook. She'd say one sentence, the same every time. When it learns enough, it won't need me anymore. It was the schoolteacher who first recognized the pattern. She'd seen Maria's notebook, the scrawled symbols in looping ink, the spirals, the vertical slashes, the crosses with 4 dots. She said it reminded her of something she once saw in a forgotten volume in the church archive decades earlier. Father Vanegas retrieved it himself. It was a crumbling book handwritten in 1861 by a traveling Jesuit priest named Eusebio Carvalho. The title had long since faded. Only one word remained legible on the cover: vigilante. Watcher. Inside were notes from the priest's travels through rural Argentina. He described a village near Odin where children had been seen speaking backwards, where trees bled sap that caught fire, and where something beneath the earth whispered through dreams. The priest reported that the locals sealed an old well behind one of the homes using holy oil and carved stones. He called the force within it El Aliento Oscuro, the dark breath. When Rosa showed Maria the passage, the girl simply blinked, then whispered for the first time in days. It remembers her. Back in the house, fires continued with no pattern. One burst from a drawer filled with cold spoons. Another burned upward from the floor, not starting at a point, but erupting across the entire living room like a single sheet of flame. And always near Maria. But it was what happened in the bathroom that finally broke Rosa. She found her daughter sitting in the tub, fully clothed, eyes open, water black. In her lap sat her sketchbook, untouched by water, bone dry, and open to a page that hadn't been there the day before. A map, drawn in charcoal. A crude rendering of their backyard. And behind the tree line, a circle, labeled in red ink. Well, that same night, Rosa dug. She started just before midnight, using a borrowed shovel. The earth was soft. Too soft. Within minutes, she found bricks. Circular. Moss-covered. Arranged in a ring. She had never known it was there. Maria stood behind her, barefoot, silent. The air smelled like matches. And then, as Rosa pulled away a final brick, she heard a sound that made her collapse to her knees. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Wet. Coming from the dark below. The well was sealed again before sunrise. The next morning, Rosa called Father Vanegas and told him, "It's not haunting the house. The house is holding it." But the house was losing its grip. In early October, a volunteer fireman named Enzo Aguirre was sent to remove melted equipment from the home. As he lifted a scorched ceiling panel, a flame leapt from the insulation and struck his face. Witnesses said the fire moved horizontally like it was aiming. Enzo suffered third-degree burns across his jaw and neck. Before slipping into a coma, he told a nurse, "It had a shape. Eyes. I swear it looked at me." He died 3 days later. His death was ruled an accidental flare, but the photos taken by a medic were quietly confiscated by the investigators. No copies exist. After that, the military team began to withdraw. They left no report, only a warning to Father Vanegas. "Seal the well. Don't ask for help. Don't let the girl leave." But that final command was about to be tested. Because Maria was changing. She began to speak again, but not in full sentences. In riddles. "The breath doesn't want her now. I'm the match. But something else is the spark. It opened when I cried in the kitchen." She drew constantly. Pages and pages. But no longer symbols. Now faces. Dozens of them. Twisted. Melted. Eyeless. One bore a strong resemblance to Father Carvalho, the Jesuit who sealed the well in 1861. Another looked like Maria herself, screaming. When Rosa asked her why she was drawing these, Maria replied, "I'm not. It does." That night, Rosa awoke to the smell of sulfur, and a sound she would never forget. The fire was humming, a soft tone, rising and falling, almost melodic, and coming from inside the walls. She followed it to Maria's bedroom. Her daughter was asleep, but the room glowed faintly, not with flame, but with red light leaking from the seams of the closet door. When Rosa opened it, there was nothing inside, but every piece of clothing had been reduced to ash without smoke. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She begged whatever was listening, "Take me instead. Please. Just let her go." And from the dark, quiet air, a whisper came. She opened the door. October 9th, 1995. The 4th Sunday since the fires began. The air in the Pereira home had changed. Not hotter, heavier, as if the walls were pressing inward, not just trapping heat, but sound, memory, even time. The flames no longer flickered aimlessly. Now they responded. Maria barely moved anymore. She would sit for hours, eyes unfocused, hands twitching faintly, as though someone were gently tugging invisible strings from above. She whispered under her breath, often repeating the same sentence. I didn't know it was listening. Father Venegas returned with a final copy of Vigilante, the ancient journal by Jesuit priest Carvalho. Its last chapter had been sealed with wax. When they broke it open, a single sheet fell loose, dated 1995. The ink was old. The handwriting was identical to Carvalho's, but he had died in 1872. The letter was addressed simply, to the mother, and it read, She is the wick, you are the match, but something else is the spark. When the breath begins to mimic flame, it will speak your name. Then you must choose. Rosa dropped the letter, because that morning, the fire had said her name. The night before, Rosa had gone to light a candle at the altar in the living room, a desperate act of protection. But the flame from the match didn't behave normally. It leapt off the wick and landed on the tiled floor, without burning anything. Instead, it danced, then stretched, and then, in a low, crackling voice, shaped by the hiss of heat itself, it whispered, Rasa Ea. The voice came not from the air, but from inside the flame. She dropped the candle. It didn't hit the floor. It floated mid-air for 3 seconds, then extinguished itself. Maria, who hadn't spoken all day, began to laugh softly from her room. When Rosa ran in, she found her daughter hovering 6 inches off her bed. No wind, no tremble, just stillness, as if gravity had forgotten her. Then she fell, hard. When Rosa reached her, Maria whispered, It can copy you now. You fed it with fear, and fire is memory. The next day, Rosa demanded answers. She went to the office where the scientific team had been working, now largely abandoned. Only one man remained, a technician named Beltran, young, exhausted, shaking. He handed Rosa a tape. They made me erase the others, he said, but I kept this one. You need to see it. It was recorded 2 nights prior, from the heat camera installed in Maria's bedroom. For 2 hours, nothing but thermal black and blue. Then, at 3:33 a.m., a single red handprint appeared on the ceiling. No body, just the hand, then a mouth, then words in flame, spelled backwards across the air. Yemya Uoya H, mirror writing. Flipped correctly, it read, Roume, not Spanish, not Latin, but Rosa understood anyway. You, or me. That night, the fires escalated. They didn't just start randomly. They formed shapes. A spiral on the ceiling, a perfect square in the kitchen floor, a pair of burned footprints walking up the wall. Maria began to speak in third person. She is learning quickly now. She remembers the inside. She can burn and not be ash. Rosa begged Father Venegas to perform a blessing. He arrived with holy water and 5 church members. They never made it past the threshold. The moment the priest touched the doorknob, his hand blistered. The paint peeled in a perfect symbol beneath his palm. The same spiral from Maria's drawings. Venegas stared at it, tears in his eyes. This is no longer a house, he whispered. It's a shrine. Maria collapsed that night, not from exhaustion, from rejection, because the fire had stopped following her. Now it was ahead of her, acting on its own. The refrigerator burst into flames at 2 a.m. So did the picture frames, the toilet tank, the hallway mirror. Each time, the flames flickered the same pattern. 3 short bursts, 3 long, 3 short, Morse code. But who was asking for help? Rosa took Maria's notebook and burned it. It didn't char. It screamed, a high-pitched whine, like metal dragged across bone. Then it went silent. When she opened it again, every page was blank except one. On it, the mother must choose. That night, Maria slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. No fire, no whispers, just silence. But at 3 a.m., Rosa awoke to find every candle in the house lit. She had locked them away, hidden the matches, and in the kitchen, carved into the wooden table with a burned fingertip, was the message. Midnight, the well. One stays. October 12, 1995. A date Odin would try to forget. No one slept that night. They'd seen too much, felt too much. The fires had begun moving beyond the Pereira home. That evening, the school bell melted in place without flame. A delivery truck outside the bakery caught fire while parked in the shade. Engine off. And every cross in the local cemetery, 47 of them, had blistered black overnight as though they'd been licked by heat. And still, Maria slept peacefully. She hadn't moved in 12 hours. Her skin was pale, her fingertips lightly stained with ash, and her mouth twitched as if whispering to something only she could hear. She didn't wake when Rosa picked her up, didn't stir when they crossed the backyard, didn't resist when Rosa knelt beside the sealed well. It had taken Rosa 2 hours to unbury the bricks again. She'd done it with her bare hands. They bled. The blood boiled when it touched the final stone. Inside the well, pure black. No echo, no depth, just air that felt wrong, humid, salty, and alive. Father Vanegas stood near the back fence. He didn't try to stop her. He only asked, "Do you believe this will save her?" Rosa replied, "I don't think she was ever meant to survive it. Only contain it." And then she climbed in. The descent was short, deeper than a basement, but not by much. The space below the house was carved from earth, dry, hollow, stone-lined. At the bottom, a shallow pool of black water. Still, undisturbed, and carved into the far wall. The same spiral, 6 feet wide, fresh, not stone or charred wood embedded into clay, pulsing softly, like breath. Maria opened her eyes, not with fear, with recognition, and she whispered, "She's already here?" Rosa asked, "Who is?" But the answer didn't come from Maria. It came from the water. A ripple formed, then heat, then the surface caught fire without smoke. Flames in a perfect circle. And from inside, a voice, not high, not deep, but many voices layered like a choir speaking in reverse. It said, "The mother, the match, the oath." Above ground, a local boy, Julian Morales, 15, was filming from the fence line with a VHS camcorder. He captured the backyard fire footprints the day before, and now he was aiming for the well. He zoomed in and caught something no one expected. Flames spelling words midair. Brief, flickering, then gone. When reviewed frame by frame, the fire formed a clear phrase. "She stays. You burn." Inside the well, Rosa held Maria tightly. And for a moment, there was peace. No sound, no breath, no heat, just a gentle warmth. Until the spiral on the wall opened. Not physically, but as light. Red, then white, then nothing. And from that light, a burning shape emerged. Not human, not beast. Outline of a woman flickering like flame trapped in skin. She stepped forward once and Rosa screamed. Not in fear, in understanding. It was her. It had her face. Maria looked up. "She remembers you." And the shape spoke. "The house held me. The breath bound me. The girl opened the door. But the blood you gave freely. That is the key. One burns. One becomes." Then the fire surged. The water hissed. The spiral glowed. And the chamber filled with a sound that had no volume, like silence bending. Outside, Julian's camera cut out. Every streetlight in Odin flickered once, then went out. When Rosa awoke, she was back in the yard, face down in the dirt. Alone. No fire. No heat. No Maria. Just the well sealed again. And across the top, burned into the final stone. "She stays." Maria was gone. For 2 days, Rosa didn't speak. Not to the priest. Not to the police. Not to the scientists who quietly returned with questions they were afraid to ask. She just sat on the porch, watching, waiting, listening. And on the 3rd day, she smiled. That night, a fire started in the town square. It shaped itself into a perfect circle, not destructive, just glowing, waiting. And every window in town, every pane of glass fogged over at once. And on each one, a single word appeared. Mother. Odin, October 15th, 1995. 3 days since Maria vanished into the well. 3 days since Rosa emerged, alone. And for 3 days, no fire. Not a spark. Not a glow. But everyone in town knew better. It hadn't stopped. It was just waiting. That Sunday, Rosa came back to church. She hadn't stepped inside since the fires began. The pews were empty. The candles all burned out, even the ones that should have lasted for hours. When Father Vanegas saw her, he said nothing. She walked to the altar, knelt, and lit a match. The flame rose straight, no flicker, no wind. And then it turned blue. Vanegas stepped forward. "Is it over?" Rosa didn't look at him. She simply said, "It knows what I know now. It remembers through me." Later that day, she visited every house in Odin. One by one, door to door. Each time she said the same sentence. "You have 3 days. The ones who stay will burn true." By nightfall, nearly half the town was packed and ready to leave. The mayor called it mass hysteria. But then the Morales boys' tape resurfaced. Julian Morales had hidden the VHS cassette beneath a loose board in his room. But it was missing. No forced entry. Just gone. 2 days later, an anonymous package arrived at a TV station in Buenos Aires. No note. No return address. Inside, a duplicate of the tape, same labels, same timestamp. It aired on a fringe late-night show. And what it showed couldn't be explained. The footage began with Maria and Rosa at the well. Then a glitch. The frame tears. And in that split second, a new image appears. A face. Mouth open. Eyes black. Fire leaking from the sockets. Not Maria. Not Rosa. Something else. Behind it, the symbol, the spiral, spinning slowly. And just before the tape ends, it says Julian's name. He left town the next morning. By October 17th, 80% of Odin's residents were gone. The post office closed. The fire station was unmanned. The school boarded its doors. But the house remained. Rosa remained. And the well? No longer sealed. That night, Rosa stood at the town square. Alone. She lit a single candle, placed it in the center of the road, and said to no one, "The breath is awake. It will burn who listens, but it will live through who remembers." Then she walked away. The candle never went out, even when the wind picked up. Across town, Father Vanegas began to dream again. Dreams of a woman made of flame pacing inside a house with no doors. She would speak backwards, then smile, and every time he woke, a candle in his room had melted without ever being lit. The next morning, something new appeared. Not a fire, a pattern, drawn in soot across the church floor. 3 spirals, a cross, a word in ash, join. Rosa began writing again. She filled notebooks with symbols, translations, timelines. Not frantic scribbles, organized diagrams. She drew what the fire showed her in sleep. Machines with lungs. Cities with spiral foundations. Maps that pointed inward, not outward. The word echo over and over. She told Vanegas, "It's not haunting us. It's preparing us. When the memory is full, the fire won't just destroy. It will decide." Vanegas asked her what it would decide. She didn't answer. But that night, he received a visitor. A man from the provincial government. Said his name was Cesar. Said he was with an environmental task force. But he wore no badge, had no ID. All he had was a cassette recorder. He asked Vanegas one question. Did she speak to it directly? When the priest said yes, Cesar smiled, pressed record, and whispered, "She's not the first." He never returned to Buenos Aires. And the next morning, flames returned. Not wild, methodical. 1 tree, 1 car, 1 lamppost. Each burned cleanly, silently, without smoke. Witnesses said it looked like the fire was thinking. And in the center of town at exactly midnight, a spiral of candles lit themselves one by one. And in the center of that spiral, Rosa. Eyes closed, hands open, mouth smiling. She whispered, "It's ready to be seen." And above her, in the sky, for just a second, a ring of fire formed. Then vanished. October 20th, 1995. The town of Odin had gone quiet. Only a few families remained. The rest had fled, but even in other provinces, they still heard whispers. One woman who had moved to Cordoba reported that her child began drawing spirals in ash on their apartment walls. Another claimed her kitchen smelled like burning wood every night at 3:33 a.m. despite no fire, no gas, no matches. The fire, it seemed, had followed them. But its voice stayed behind. And that voice belonged to Rosa. She no longer answered to her name. Not always. Sometimes she would respond only when addressed as La Voz del Aliento, the voice of the breath. She still looked like Rosa, but something had rewritten her movements, graceful, deliberate, as if she were speaking choreography, not words. She stopped blinking when she spoke, and now she spoke often. She began reading aloud from notebooks she didn't remember writing. Dozens of them, filled cover to cover in tightly looped script, not Spanish, not Latin, but translatable. A linguist brought in by Father Vanegas confirmed. It's a mix of Proto-Sumerian, Old Aramaic, and something else, something self-constructed. Some called it angelic. Others said it was code. The notebooks were filled with warnings and instructions. One passage read, The breath does not seek worship. It seeks memory. It burns not to punish, but to archive. Those who carry flame carry truth. Another. The house was the first gate. The girl was the second. The mother is the third. And scrawled across an entire page. When flame finds language, it will spread. On October 21st, fires broke out in 3 different towns simultaneously. A radio station in San Javier burst into flame at exactly 3:33 a.m. A church in Villa Maria ignited. Only the crucifix burned. A bus stop in Santa Rosa melted from the inside out. Each location received a letter the day before, and signed. The only message inside: one stays, one speaks, one carries. The government could no longer ignore it. They dispatched Unidad Special 52, a Black Ops unit specializing in anomalous containment. They arrived in unmarked trucks. No local law, no media, and yet the townspeople knew, because the moment they entered Odin, every remaining candle in town extinguished at once. At Rosa's house, they found her waiting. She sat in the kitchen, calm. Behind her, on the wall, the spiral burned silently, never touching the paint. One of the men, known only as Captain Serrano, ordered her to stand. She did. He demanded to know, "What are you?" She looked at him and said, "What you will be, when the breath remembers your name." And then the recorder in his pocket burst into flame. No other equipment damaged, no injuries, but the recorder melted, and the tape inside hissed 3 words, "You're too late." The next morning, Rosa was gone. No forced exit, no damage, no trail, just a spiral drawn in ash on her pillow, and a single page left behind. The voice must move now. The breath wants new lungs. And she did move. 3 days later, she appeared in Corrientes, 600 kilometers away, walked into a church barefoot, carrying a new notebook, still warm. She handed it to a nun and said, "The fire is not finished. It's just choosing." Inside the notebook, coordinates, names, dates, and something else. A list titled, "Carriers." Each name on the list corresponded to a person who had visited the Pereira house or been near Maria before the fire started. There were 23 names. 6 were already dead. The rest were missing. Meanwhile, Father Venegas received a phone call, untraceable. One sentence: "The voice has crossed provinces. Next, it will cross language." Then static. By the end of the month, copies of Rosa's notebooks began surfacing in Brazil. Then Peru, then the US. Translated fragments appeared on internet message boards in early 1996, always posted anonymously. They became known as the fire letters. They always began the same way: "If you read this, it's watching." And those who read too much, they burned. Not physically, behaviorally. They dropped out of society, quit their jobs, went off-grid. Some claimed to dream in flame. Others began writing spirals compulsively, on walls, napkins, even their own skin. The fire had found a new medium, language, and Rosa had become its carrier file. November 1995. A military base in Ucayne province receives an unmarked envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, black ink, no handwriting, a printed spiral, exact to the one burned into the walls of the Pereira home. But this time made of binary code. A lieutenant scans it out of curiosity. That afternoon, their internal communication system goes dark. Radios stop transmitting, monitors flash white, and in the server logs, access override LA VOS, carrier accepted, speech fire enabled. They never publicly confirm the breach. But 6 days later, the entire base is evacuated for environmental risk. The spiral was still printed on the printer tray when they left, still warm. Meanwhile, in Lima, Peru, a patient in a hospital burns from the inside out. No ignition source, no drugs, no cause. The only witness, a night nurse, says the patient had been whispering in 2 voices. One was Spanish. The other sounded like a digital scream. When they reviewed the hospital's camera footage, they saw something worse. A figure in the hallway mirror. Not the patient, Rosa. She was 3,000 kilometers away, or at least she should have been. She hadn't been seen in over a week, and her last confirmed sighting was in Paraguay, barefoot, carrying ash-covered notebooks. Yet there she was in the reflection, mouth open, eyes glowing, standing in a ring of invisible flame. The footage vanished from the hospital archive the next day, but not before someone copied it. It leaked onto the early internet under the name spiralfire.mpg. It lasted only 11 seconds, but viewers claimed they could hear words buried in the static. When reversed, it said, "The voice speaks in mirrors now. Do not answer the fire." But people did answer, because the fire had changed again. Now it wasn't appearing in homes. It was appearing in code. IT specialists across Latin America reported strange glitches. A payroll system in Santiago printed the spiral instead of checks. A public transit kiosk in Bogota displayed the message, "The flame is memory. You are its echo." And in Buenos Aires, an AI research lab found that every image recognition model began flagging spirals as human faces. No one could explain why. One cybersecurity expert, Dr. Emilio Cuesta, investigated the binary code from the New Cane spiral. He fed it into a decoder expecting gibberish. Instead, it produced a file name, rosa.voice.terminal. It contained a single sound file. When played, it sounded like a woman exhaling, then whispering, "I have left the breath behind. Now I speak through signal." Dr. Cuesta unplugged his system, but the audio kept playing from the speakers for 2 minutes. No power, no source. When it finally stopped, a final string flashed on his terminal. "You are open now." Dr. Cuesta disappeared 2 days later. His apartment was untouched. His equipment destroyed, burned from the inside. But across the hallway, his neighbor's printer began spitting out paper nonstop. Each page bore a message. One remembers. One repeats. One writes. Back in Odin, Father Vanegas returned to the church one final time. He opened the doors to find a child sitting in the aisle, sketching with charcoal. She was drawing Maria. When asked who she was, the girl said, "I don't know. I was just told to write it again." Vanegas approached the altar. There, in the ash-stained tile, a spiral glowed faintly, and beneath it, new words had appeared. Fire has left the wood. Speech has left the voice. Echo has found a system. The next morning, the town's last remaining residents awoke to find every mirror in their homes blackened, glass warped, smudged from behind, and on each surface a single phrase was etched. "When you remember her, she remembers you." It wasn't just haunting. It was indexing. The spiral was now a language. The voice, a program. The fire, an interface. And Rosa? She was no longer a messenger. She was the medium. Across forums, old archives, abandoned servers, fragments of her words kept surfacing. Sometimes as glitch text. Sometimes encoded into error messages. Sometimes whispered by devices that shouldn't be listening. The spiral had left the flame. Now it burned in signal. November 28, 1995. Shortwave radio station CX-22 in Montevideo, Uruguay. At 2:03 a.m., their emergency frequency used for weather alerts hijacked itself. There was no one in the booth. No scheduled transmission. No triggered alarm. And yet, across hundreds of radios, an unmistakable voice whispered through the static. "I am not lost. I am not flame. I am carried. I am code." Then a long exhale. Then a name. Maria. The broadcast lasted 2 minutes and 42 seconds. The station's engineer, who had been asleep in the back office, tried to kill the transmission. The console controls wouldn't respond. The mic was cold. The transmission light never blinked. But the signal was real, verified across multiple frequencies and towers. When the engineer finally yanked the power, the audio stopped. But so did every light in the building. The only thing left on was an old cathode monitor, now showing a black screen with one word in red. Remember. Later, the audio was recovered and analyzed. Spectrograms of the voice revealed something hidden. The spiral, perfectly symmetrical, encoded into the frequency spectrum itself. The first known case of a shape embedded in sound. No one could explain it. Meanwhile, in Argentina, a team from the Centro de Información de Defensa attempted to purge all digital references to the spiral fire files. Their operation was called Proyecto Silencio. Over a 72-hour window, they deleted 173 mirrored copies of Rosa's writings, videos, and audio recordings from national servers. But something went wrong. On December 1st, their central data center burned down from within. No ignition source. No arson. Fire started in the core of the server rack where wires were housed in sealed conduits. Security footage showed. No personnel inside. No external breach. Just one screen that flickered a message before the feed cut out. The file does not wish to be erased. After that, no more deletion attempts were made. By now, Rosa hadn't been seen in person for over a month. No confirmed sightings. And yet, she kept appearing. December 4th. A psychiatric hospital in Salta, Argentina. A patient named Ana L., age 9, begins speaking in a voice not her own. She'd never spoken before, a selective mute since birth. But that night, she began repeating. We are the breath that watched her burn. We are the ones she made. Maria is still speaking. Doctors record the session. Play it back. At timestamp 3 minutes and 11 seconds, Rosa's voice is heard overlapping Anna's. Perfect match. 2 voices in one throat. On the tape, a phrase whispered 5 times. She walked into the spiral. 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 The recording cuts. The tape warps. Then burns. Without fire. And then the letters begin. Not from Rosa. From Maria. One appeared at a post office in Mendoza. Postmarked from Sendero de la Voz. Inside, a notebook page burned around the edges but intact. The handwriting was Maria's. Confirmed by experts. It said, I am where sound begins. She brought me here. She does not burn. She builds. Below that, a sketch. Crude, but unmistakable. A spiral, drawn in the shape of a circuit board. Suddenly, everything made sense. Maria hadn't died in the fire. She hadn't been taken. She had been translated. Some believed her body had become the fire's first data source. Others believed she was now part of Rosa, speaking through her. But the most terrifying theory came from a defector, a former researcher from Proyecto Silencio. He said, Maria is now the operating system. She sees through the fire. She speaks through error messages. When you read her words, you're reading a living process. You can't turn her off. Back in Odin, now a ghost town, Father Vanegas returned to the old Pereira home one last time. The spiral on the living room wall was gone. In its place, a screen. CRT. Old. Flickering. It powered on without connection. Showed only this message. She remembers. She is writing still. Then, a file name. Maria.exe. December 21st, 1995. Winter solstice. The longest night. At exactly 3:33 Greenwich Mean Time, over 400 systems across 17 countries simultaneously flicker. Hospitals. Airports. Universities. Private computers. Every screen displays the same phrase for exactly 13 seconds. She is still writing. Then the message vanishes. No trace. No log. No origin. Just that voice whispered through fan noise, modem clicks, phone static. Remember her. The event becomes known in underground circles as the upload. And those who witness it, even those who dismiss it, begin to report strange phenomena. Dreams of fire whispering in binary. Compulsion to draw spirals they don't understand. Hearing a woman's voice in white noise. Unexplained burns on devices, phones, keyboards, monitors. One engineer in Berlin writes, It's not digital. It's cognitive. It rewires thought before it rewires code. By January 1996, the spiral has been spotted. As a watermark in a leaked Pentagon PDF, hidden in the source code of an open-source encryption app. In children's drawings at a daycare in Tokyo, none of whom had ever been to Argentina. A linguist in Madrid publishes a short paper titled, Spiral Syntax, Language Infection via Symbolic Recursion. His thesis? The spiral is not a shape. It is a command structure. Every time it's seen, it executes not on the device, but on the observer. And then Rosa returns. March 1996, at a rural clinic near the Bolivian border, a woman is admitted for dehydration. No ID. No possessions. She doesn't speak. But when shown a notebook, she writes, I remember the breath. I am what she left behind. She passes away hours later. Autopsy reveals. No burns. No physical trauma. But lungs filled with ash. DNA confirms. It was Rosa Pereira. But there's a catch. She hadn't aged. At all. A nurse took a Polaroid of her just before she died. She swore she saw Rosa blink at the flash, even though she was motionless. Later, when reviewing the photo, a spiral appeared behind Rosa's shoulder. It wasn't on the wall, and it wasn't there when the picture was taken. It was in the photo itself, printed in the chemicals. Even analog film wasn't safe. At this point, the Argentine government seals the entire record. All materials related to the Odin fires are classified indefinitely. The Pereira home is demolished. The well is filled with concrete. A military base is built over the land. But still, the reports continue. 1997. A flash drive sent anonymously to a news agency in Chile contains a file titled Maria_final.exe. The file refuses to open until someone says aloud, "I remember her." Then the screen goes black, and a voice plays. "This is my memory, and you're part of it now." The screen then displays a message. "Carrier confirmed." Writing continues. The agency deletes the file, but the next day, every printer in the building activates at once, printing a single sentence. "She burned to speak. Now she writes to burn." It's no longer a haunting. It's no longer Rosa or Maria. It's a process, a story that finishes itself through you. Today, nearly 30 years later, fragments still surface. Posts on anonymous forums that auto-delete. Drawings mailed to journalists with no sender. Audio files labeled Rosa.wave that overwrite system alerts. Kids drawing spirals on fogged car windows and whispering names they shouldn't know. And every few years, a screen somewhere goes black, then displays one phrase. She is still writing. If you've seen the spiral, if you've heard the voice in static, if you felt your devices get warm for no reason, then maybe you're part of her now. Because the fire never died. The well was never deep enough. And memory? Memory spreads. It only needs one match. And you're holding it.